So to just quickly recap on what is that we did on the last session. So last session, we saw what is a role, correct? So to quickly understand role, so instead of defining everything into a single playbook, what we can do is we can try to segregate the details of whatever that you want to give in a playbook based on how it has to act or based on a particular functionality. We will be segregating all the details, and based on that, you will give it into a separate directory structure called role. And based on what and all it has to do, for each role, you will be defining further subdirectories based on what exactly the content that you want to put inside it. You will be creating many roles. And that way, whatever the role your playbook wants to work on, based on that, you will be including that particular role. So if you see this, in this playbook, now we have just included one role called web server, wherein now, if I include this, whatever is being given inside this role, it will be tried to inherit, and based on that, it will be behaving. So that way, rather than directly giving everything inside this playbook, you're going to split based on what functionality or what role that it has to play on your machine. Accordingly, you will be creating the roles. So further, if you go inside the folder called roles, wherein if you are maintaining a roles, then you have to create a structure where on the same directory there will be one folder called as roles, and inside that you will be having the same name of what role you have given, so that this is the name of the role. And further, if you go inside it, for each of the specific section that you want to add in this playbook, correspondingly in the role, you will be creating separate folders where each one of them will be having a main.yaml in which you will be defining all the details. So that way, now if you look at the tasks folder, you will be having one main.yaml in which we will be defining all the tasks. Rather than defining directly on the playbook, we will be defining it inside the tasks folder main.yaml. And in case if you want to use a variable section for this role, then particularly in the vars folder, there will be a main.yaml in which you will be defining it. Same way, if you have a particular task which has to be handled, then that you will be putting it under the handler section main.yaml. So this way, whatever is needed to be done for a specific role, you can include only in that role folder, and based on the name of the structure, you will be creating one YAML file inside each one of them, and you'll be creating. And correspondingly, if you want to use a specific role and you include, that role will be inherited by the playbook, and based on what you have defined in this, you will be working on it. So that is how the same playbook you can use to work on it in a different way. So rather than specifying only a single list of sequential tasks, you can break it up into groups, and then you define as a role. So based on what role you include and whatever the content that you have, it will be picking it up. So this is what we saw. Right now, quickly to run. So to run the same thing, you will be calling the Ansible playbook and the name of the playbook, so that whatever the role that you have included, based on that, if you have any kind of data that it has to pick it up, correspondingly, you can see it is picking up a role name, and inside that, whatever tasks, variables that you have, it is trying to pick all those things correspondingly, and it will work. Okay, so this is what we saw on the roles. Now, to talk on the roles further, you can actually give a condition while including a role. Now, when do you use it? Now, let's say for a set of machine, you are writing a playbook, and in that playbook, now if you have separate roles that you want to include, now just like the task, if I include one more role in this playbook, then that will also be getting executed. Suppose rather than giving everything as it is, if you want to give a condition based on which the role should be executed, then just like how we use the keyword called when for a target on the task, it used to run only on the condition. The same way, even in the role, you can include a specific role based on a condition. So in this example, on the previous role that we had, what was the task that we had? So we had two tasks. One is to install Apache on the Red Hat, and the other one is to install Apache on the Ubuntu. Now, rather than giving the condition here, what we can do is I can create several playbooks and in that multiple roles, and I can give a condition in the role in such a way that only if a condition is satisfied, it will be picking up a particular role. So rather than taking up everything, you can decide which role you want to do. So that now what we can do, I will put one more role, and in that I will give only this task, and we will call it as a Red Hat web server. That's the role. And we will create one more role. In that I will put the task only for the Apache, and we will call it as Ubuntu role. So that now in the condition, if I work, I can say include this particular role only if the fact which the Ansible has gathered against a machine which you are running, and that machine is a Red Hat based machine, then you use this. Suppose if the machine on which you are running is a Ubuntu machine, then correspondingly it will be using a separate role to include. So that is how, even though you give, it will not be using, and it will be using it only if the condition is satisfied. Okay, so that's how, based on a condition, you can choose which role you want to work for your playbook. Okay, so now with just a little change, we will try to create another two roles. So now what we will do here is, so we have this folder, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly copy this web servers into Red Hat web servers. I'm just trying to copy it quickly. Okay, so you can see now it is a copy. Now in this, if you go, you'll be again having everything. Now in this, let's open the tasks main.yaml, and here I'm not interested to keep the Debian, so I'll keep only the Apache relate, that is the CentOS or the Red Hat related tasks. Okay, same way, if I don't want to define the variables correspondingly, I can remove this. So this way, in this Red Hat web server role, I have tasks only to install Apache on CentOS and restart the service correspondingly. Now, if needed, what we can do, we can create one more role. So I can just copy paste in my time here. So instead of giving this Red Hat, now I'll give Debian. Okay, and in the Debian, what we'll do, we'll have the same structure. So let's open the main.yaml and remove the Red Hat here, so that the tasks that you're going to have in this will be corresponding only to Ubuntu. Same way, if you want to remove the variable section, you can remove the Red Hat related variable. So now if you use Red Hat web server, it is going to install Apache on a CentOS machine based on the condition. The same thing, if you are going to run it against a Debian machine, then you will be using this role in which you have the task to install the Apache on Debian. Okay, so like that, you can call specific role. And to do that, what we will do now is, on the roles, if when you have a condition to be given like this, now this is equivalent to giving this when line beneath it, just like how we gave for the task. But just to make sure it is looking simple, I have added directly here by giving a comma. If not, you will first give role, the name of it, and below that you will be giving the keyword called when. If not, you can directly add it up here. Okay, so now let's go to our master playbook, and in this, instead of one web server that you have hard coded, let's give a condition where we are saying to use this particular role when the operating system family is Red Hat, and in case if not, you're going to use this. Okay, so in our case, the machine is a CentOS machine or a Red Hat machine. So based on that, it is going to use all the tasks that is available from this role. Okay. So now if you just run Ansible playbook and the playbook name, so you can see now it is going to call the Red Hat server, whereas the other task that we have is being skipped. That is because we have not included it directly. So this is how you can specify a particular role based on a condition and invoke it only on a particular condition. Getting it? Okay. Now, that's pretty much from the roles. Okay. Now, let's come back to the generic playbook. Again, it doesn't matter whether you are going to use it in role, because as I said, a role is nothing but separating the tasks, whatever that you want to give. Instead of giving it in a single playbook, you can define it by giving it into roles. Okay, so that way we saw many keywords like run once or looping, right? So condition. So like this, now there is one more keyword called as wait for. So what is the purpose for this? So if you have a scenario where we have to wait for a particular condition before a task is executing, because what will happen now, as soon as you give a task in a playbook, and if you call the Ansible playbook, what will happen? It will try to execute the tasks one by one, and as soon as one task complete, it will then go on to the next task. But instead of this, let's say if you have some dependency where it could be within the same playbook or within the different projects, then at any point of time, if you want to wait for a particular task to be completed, depending on a condition, then you can think about using this keyword as wait for. So what this will do is it will try to wait for a particular condition, and until that condition is not matched, this keyword will not allow the task to proceed further. Okay, so that is how, if you have some dependency on some other tasks, because when you're writing some playbook in the production, now let's say there are two playbooks and both the playbook is used for a same machine, where one playbook configures something and the other playbook is used for some other configuration. Now if one of them is dependent on other, then you can use this wait for and give the condition based on which it has to wait until the condition is matching. So that way you can ensure, if you have a task and for that task if you add the keyword called wait for, then unless and until that particular condition is met, the Ansible will not complete the task at all. It will be under the waiting condition where we have to make sure the condition is matched. Okay, so whenever you have such a requirement to wait for a particular condition is satisfied in Ansible, then we will use the keyword called wait for. Okay, so by saying it, when you say wait for, then what is that you have to wait for? That is something important that we need to understand, right? Because if I say, okay, a target is running and it has to wait for some condition, and then only if the condition is successful or satisfied, it will proceed further. But that way, what is that it has to wait for? So there are two types of conditions that you can specify here. So the first condition is a path or a file name, where you can specify if there is any particular file that should be available before completing this task. So that way, now let's say you have a particular file which you need to be available. So when you set this wait for, then it will try to check if the file is available. And if the file is not available, it will not complete the previous task. So it will be waiting until this particular file, whatever that you have mentioned, is available in that machine where Ansible is running. So that is how, if there is a requirement where you want to check for a file available, then you can specify this. And remember, Ansible will not complete the task unless it is seeing that file. So if the file is not there, then Ansible will not run and it will be waiting for. So you can use it on many other scenarios, like let's say there is one more playbook which is installing something, and if it doesn't leave a configuration file, then there might be a problem. So that is how you can write another playbook to monitor it, and based on the availability of that condition, it will be waiting for. So in this case, now if you specify a file, unless and until the file is not available, Ansible will not complete the task. It will be waiting for the file should be appearing. So that way you can give a file name and ask Ansible to wait. If not, you can also specify some content inside the file. Like I said, a configuration. So you're not interested just to see the availability of the file, but inside the file, if you have specific content that you want to check, you can then use the same wait for. Okay, so that is one condition that you can give. But in the same way, you can also check for a port number of a web application. So when I say web application, if you want to access, you will be using the URL, and in that there will be a specific port against which it will be running. All right. For instance, Jenkins. So we saw Jenkins runs on a port called 8080. And then we saw another example called Artifactory. That also is going to run on 8081. Then if you have any web server like Apache or Nginx, then it is going to run on the port number called default 80. So that is how, if you have any application which is running on web, and if you want to access that or to wait for that, then the other way of specifying the wait condition is a particular port. So that if you tell the port number on the machine, then it will try to make sure whether that particular port is available in the machine that you're trying to say. So when I say port is available, all you are going to check is whether the application is running, and because of which you are able to access the port. So that is what here the wait for can also be used. So that now, let's say I want to check only if the Jenkins is installed and it is running, then I should go with some other tasks. So that way now we can specify to the wait for that wait for the port of a specific number like 8080, and only if it is available, mark the task which you are running as completed. If not, wait until that particular condition is satisfied, wherein the condition could be checking for a particular for a particular port number which is open. So that is what we call it as listening a port. So whether it is available, or we can also check for a existence of a file which is available on the same machine where you are trying to call the Ansible. Okay, so like this, you can give two types of conditions and tell the Ansible task to wait until the user either does some action and creates a file, or automatically it has been done by some other process. Okay, getting it on what is wait for, so that we can see some examples practically. Okay, so now first let's take a port example and see whether it is running. So now, how do you define? So you will be having a keyword called wait for. Okay, and for that, if you are trying to check for a port availability, then you will use another sub key called as port, and what is the port number to which the Ansible should check, and in that, what is the state for which you want to check. Are you checking whether the port is available? When I say port is available, the application is running on it. So that's how, if you want to check whether the application is running and it should be running, then you will say port 80 status started. The same thing if you do not want anything running on that, then the condition is state is absent. So that's how. Now if you add this task, what it will do is it will not complete the playbook. It will wait here until on whatever machine that you have specified the port 80 is available, and only if it is available it will go ahead and complete the task. Okay, now you don't have to really write in a role. Let's try to create a simple playbook, and in that we will try to define. Okay, so let's take this condition itself. Anyway, let's take something else. Asynchronous. Even it doesn't have. Anyways, we'll use this itself. We need to align it. So indentation is very important. Sorry. So now if you see, this is the keyword for this task, where we are saying check whether on whatever machine you are running, in that machine, if you have a port 80 listening, then you complete it. In case if it is not, then it will wait until this port number 80 is listened or available on this machine. Okay, so here let's use the local machine for that as an example. So I'm going to check on the same machine where you're running the Ansible, do you have the port number 80 available, which means after you have installed the Apache, whether you have started the service. That is what we are going to see here. Okay, now let's run this. But before running, let's try to remove HTTPD. Okay, we have deleted, and now let's run the Ansible playbook. Okay, and what was this name? Condition, right? Oh, sorry, async. Okay, so now if you run, sorry, okay, I have to go to playbooks. What's the mistake? Okay. Anyway, there's a spelling mistake here, but let's not worry. Okay, so now let's run this. So here, now you can see if it is, first thing is it is trying to install it. After installing, now you can see it is waiting at this task. This is the name of the task, and it is going to wait until the port 80 is available on the machine whatever it has taken. So I've given localhost on this localhost machine. If the port 80 or 80 is available, then it is going to pick it up. If not, until that port is available, this task is going to be waiting. Okay. Now here, quickly, if I just try to start the service. Okay, as soon as I enter, you can see immediately the task will be completed, because as soon as I enter, it is going to what? It is going to create the port 80 and it is going to run. So because of this, this task will be able to reach the port 80. You can see it immediately completed. So that is how you can check for a specific condition, where if it is a port, you specify what is the port that you want to check and the number and what is the state. So then Ansible will be waiting until that particular condition is matched. Getting it? On how to use wait for. Okay, now this is on the port. But if you remember, I also told we can give one more condition where we can specify a file and ask the Ansible playbook to wait for that particular file available in the machine. So that way, if you want to specify for checking a file, then you will use a keyword called path instead of the port. Now let's say instead of this, if I want to specify a file, I can basically give it here as path. And let's say on this machine, I want to check whether there is a file called wait for me. Okay, so there is nothing in the directory of the temp, right? So I'll give this here. So what it will do is, just like how it was waiting for the port to be available, now the Ansible playbook will be waiting on that machine until this file is created. And as soon as the file is created, then it will complete the process. Okay, so let's save this. And now if you run it once again, okay, let's change the name here. Okay. So now here you can see it is trying to call this wait for the service to check if a file exists. So this is one task, and it is going to be waiting until in this machine where it has used. So on the local host, it is going to check unless and until there is a file called wait for me in the temp is available, it is not going to complete it. Okay. And now here, if I just create this file quickly, okay, you can see as soon as it is created, it will be available. Then the Ansible will complete this task and proceed further. You can see as soon as we created, immediately it went ahead and completed. So that is how you can specify a condition where either do you want to listen to a port and make sure it is available before completing a task, or you can check for the existence of a file or some content in the file to make sure whether you have to wait until that or execute the task. Okay, so that's how you will be specifying how to give the wait for. Okay, now along with that, we also have one more option where we saw that we can define a variable inside a playbook or inside a roles. But at the runtime, if you want to generate some variable and pass that value, then you will be using additional option called extra vars. So what this will do is, while you are trying to run the playbook, it will try to create this variable with this value. And if you have defined this variable anywhere inside your playbook, it is going to assign the value to it. So that's how you can choose a particular value that you want to pass as a variable name using extra vars. Then automatically it will be trying to pass it. Okay, getting it? So that's pretty much from Ansible on what is that we have to do. So if you think it's all about writing a playbook where you will be defining different kind of tasks, and for that you will be using different modules. So the only thing is what specific task you want to do, corresponding to it, what is the task that you have to work, and in that you'll be using different keywords, and based on that you will be getting different functionality. And if needed, you can split up everything into a role or different roles and put all the details into that role correspondingly. If you include, Ansible playbook will be picking up the contents of that role. Okay, now, so the only activity that we will be doing here is on the major side, we will be writing different kind of playbooks, and if needed, we can give it to someone else like the dev team if they want to configure, or to the QA team in assistance. If not, we can do it for our own build machine on which we are going to do all the activities. But now, if you look, where is that playbooks that we have created so far? We created all the playbooks in one directory, correct? And where is it? It is on a machine where we have installed Ansible. But in the production, if you go, you will not be using the same machine, right? Because you will be using your machine or some other machine to develop the playbook, and then you are going to use it on a particular Ansible machine. If not, let's say you are trying to run it on some other machine, then how is that you are going to get the playbook from one machine to the other machine? So that is when, now, if you really look, what is this playbook? Playbook is nothing but a code that we can maintain. So that is how you can think about using the version controlling system on top of this, which means now what we can do, I can store it as a separate repository and then push it to the central repository. So if I create a repository of playbooks, then what will happen? Whenever I want on whatever machine, if I simply do a git clone, it will try to give all the files, and top of that we can modify, and if needed I can store the changes permanently and track what is happening and what are changes that I'm doing to it. So that way what you can do is you can create a separate git repository for this and maintain everything. So in this case, let's say you have created everything here, then simply if you just say git init, it will create a repository, and now you can see everything is a untracked file because this is a new repository that we created. So all you have to do is whenever you do a modification, do a git add and a git commit. Okay, so you can take our playbooks. So this way, every time you are going to do some changes, what will happen? You are going to store the changes as a commit on the same repository so that it will be useful for you to keep a track in case if you want to need. And then if you want, you can maintain a central repository for that. And once the changes is done, you can do a git push. So that's how you can store the changes again as a version controlling system under Git. And whenever you need, you can just simply do a git clone and you'll be getting all the playbooks into your machine, and from that you can run it. Okay, so that's how even Git will be used for us to maintain certain tasks, and you can use the Git to store the playbooks also. Getting it? So now there is another question that we might be getting. Okay, now what is the other question? So the question here is, okay, now we ran it. Okay, now after running, what is that we have to do? Now we have to automate the process of running it automatically, correct? Now how will we run it? Now if I want to run, let's say this Ansible playbook every 15 minutes in a machine, so that it is going to check whatever the configurations I want to do. Based on that, it will be making sure it is available, correct? So how is that we are going to do? Now either we have to connect to the machine, and then we will have to set up some commands to run manually. If not, we can think about creating a cron job and schedule the task automatically, correct? Now instead of this, how about using Jenkins? If you recall, we can use Jenkins for the same purpose. Why did we use Jenkins? If you have any kind of task, if you want to replace that task what you are doing manually, you can use Jenkins. Now simply what you can do, let's say when you are running the task, we would be generally have a machine, and let's say this is the machine on which we had installed Ansible. Okay, then what will happen? If you want to run some task, you will log into the specific machine, whatever the machine you have, and on this machine you will call Ansible, and using a particular playbook you will be running it. Again, I'm not saying that is it the same machine on which you are going to configure. You are going to call the playbook using the Ansible installed. Then further, this will try to connect to whatever machines that you have specified in the configuration of that, and based on that it is going to connect to all those machines, and each of the machine it will try to specify the tasks based on what you have given in the playbook. So the question what I was asking is, what if you want to run it automatically rather than we connecting? So that is when we can think about Jenkins, where in the Jenkins we will add this machine as a node, and you create a task wherein in this task you specify what is the node that you want to use and what is the command that you want to run from it. So the same command, whatever that you're going to run, Ansible playbook and the name of the playbook, you will give it here. So that now if you want to run it at a specific time, you give the time also here. So what will happen then? Exactly at that time, automatically Jenkins will connect to this machine, and in this machine it will run this command, and that will connect further to all the other machines and take care of the configuration. So this way you don't have to run it manually. You can think of using Jenkins, where if you create a job and in that job you give the scheduler based on which how frequently you want to run, then Jenkins will be automatically connecting to the machine, and it will be running the tasks on that machine for you. So that is how you can run Ansible on any machines automatically at any period of interval. Getting it? So that's how you should think about further automation, where we don't have to spend time on everything. Okay, so you should have Jenkins as a single system where you give everything to it, and from that you can try to manage and configure. So Think about like this, using Git for storing everything and Jenkins for wherever the manual step you want to run. Instead of doing it manually, you can think about using Jenkins to customize it. Okay.